Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Parent Guide, helping your teen overcome pornography addiction. I am your host, Matt Bulkley, a licensed psychotherapist. For the last 25 years, specializing in working with adolescents and families facing addiction, impulse control challenges, and mental health ripple effects of our digital world, and in particular, pornography. Parents, picture this. It's a quiet evening at home. Your 15-year-old son is supposed to be finishing his history paper, but instead you find him in his room, phone in hand, eyes glued to the screen, thumb flicking endlessly. Just one more video, Dad, he says when you check in. But that one more turns into an hour, and then two, and the paper is barely started. His eyes are bloodshot. He's irritable when you ask him to put it down. And the next morning, he's exhausted, irritable, and snapping at everybody. Does this sound familiar? Well, this isn't just teen laziness or rebellion. It's actually the powerful pull of short-form videos, particularly TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, rewiring young brains in real time. And as we'll explore today, this rewiring doesn't stop at attention and focus. It can open the door to deeper struggles, namely pornography addiction. In this episode, we'll bring the science to life through stories like Ethan's, of course, name and details change for privacy, and draw on groundbreaking work of Jonathan Haidt in the Anxious Generation book. Share more real-world examples from my clinical practice and arm you as parents with heartfelt practical strategies to help your teen reclaim their mind and their future. So let's dive in. Now let's start with the hook that makes these apps so irresistible, and that is the dopamine rush of instant gratification. Imagine your teen's brain as a reward center that's still under construction during the adolescent years. And every 15-second video clip delivers a perfect hit. Laughs, surprises, beauty, drama, swipe, reward, like, bigger reward. And this algorithm knows exactly what keeps them watching, serving up more of the same. It's like a slot machine designed for their developing brain, unpredictable, fast, and endlessly satisfying. And Jonathan Haidt describes this in a book, I think it came out last year, The Anxious Generation. It's part of this great rewiring of childhood. And he explains how smartphones, the onset of smartphones and social media have shifted us from a play-based childhood full of real-world risks, boredom, and deep focus to a phone-based one that's dominated by constant stimulation. Short-form videos are the ultimate example of this. They fragment attention, they deliver quick dopamine hits, and they train the brain to crave novelty over depth. So in my practice, I met a 14-year-old boy, call him Ethan, started with a funny dance challenge, but soon he couldn't stop. He says, it's like my brain won't let me quit. Homework felt torturous because nothing matched the speed and the excitement of those short clips. Studies just from the last couple of years, 24 and 2025, back this up. Research shows that short-form video use correlates with reduced sustained attention, higher addiction tendencies, and even changes in brain activity linked to dopamine pathways. And heavy users often report feeling restless without their phone, just like someone craving their next fix, just like a drug addict. And so evolution, the process of evolution wired us for quick rewards. I mean, that part's not new. Spotting fruit or danger kept our ancestors alive, but now apps exploit that wiring. Teens abandon slower joys like reading a book or building something or even talking face to face because the payoff isn't instant. If your teen reaches for their phone the second things get quiet, this craving cycle is likely at play. Now let's talk about what happens when attention gets shredded. And Jonathan Haidt in the book calls it attention fragmentation, one of four core harms of the phone-based childhood, alongside sleep deprivation, social deprivation, and addiction. So if you think back to, I think I've covered it in a previous episode, the Microsoft study from several years ago, where it was concluded that the average attention span had dropped to 8 seconds. And now with short videos exploding since then, experts warn it's even worse for today's teens. A 2025 narrative review of studies ranging 6-year span, 2019 to 2025, found that intensive short form use is tied to poorer inhibitory control, more distractions, and real struggles with sustained tasks. Remember 16-year-old Jake, we'll call him, he used to devour novels, Harry Potter, fantasy books, but after months of heavy reels and TikTok, he said, books are too slow now. Start reading, my mind wanders, I need something happening every few seconds. And he'd sit down to try to do homework and maybe last 5 minutes before he needed to scroll, and his grades slipped. Anxiety started to escalate. His brain had adapted to rapid switches, making focus feel unnatural and frustrating, and he lost the desire and the ability to read these novels. And Jonathan Haidt in the book emphasizes that during puberty, the brain is highly plastic, vulnerable to these changes. Constant interruptions hinder prefrontal cortex development, the part that handles executive functions like planning and impulse control. And the result, poor school performance, higher frustration, and a sense of, well, why bother when things take effort? But here's the hope. And as we've covered in previous episode, teen brains are resilient. And with the right changes, attention can be rebuilt. And this brings us to just the concept of impulse control. And the impulse control muscles, so to speak, they get weakened by all those quick wins. And Jonathan Haidt compared social media platforms to addictive slot machines with variable rewards. So in other words, you never know when the next viral hit comes. Teens who chase these highs show more impulsivity in other areas of life. So in other words, looks like skipping chores or late night binges or emotional outbursts when limits are set. And in my clinical practice and sessions, I've seen this spill over. One teen thinking of started with casual scrolling, but it escalated, moved into impulsive purchases where he had started spending hundreds of dollars on purchases in a video game, an online video game, which led to arguments and then some even riskier online behavior, making him vulnerable to being exploited online. And here's the thing, it's not necessarily willful defiance, but it looks more like the brain prioritizing short-term pleasure over long-term good. And this is where real concern ties back to our podcast focus, which is how this sets the stage for pornography addiction. As everyday dopamine hits lose their punch, the brain seeks stronger stimuli. And Haidt in the book, Anxious Generation, notes that for boys especially, excessive screen time, including porn and gaming, displaces real-world play and connection, leading to addiction patterns. Short-form content desensitizes the reward system, lowering the threshold for delayed gratification. And I've worked with many teens who begin innocently on TikTok, but as tolerance built, algorithms and curiosity push them into edgier, more provocative suggestions. The algorithm starts to feed more and more of that. And what started as quick entertainment becomes a compulsive cycle of shame, secrecy, and escalating use, seeking provocative material that's actually pornography. And brain studies show similar impulse area activation in short video addicts and those with problematic pornography use. Parents, this escalation isn't inevitable, but ignoring the gateway risks make it more likely so. Well, so what is it that you can do as a parent? You're not powerless to this. So let me just offer this. Here are some expanded and scenario-driven strategies that I think can work that I want to introduce to you. So number one would be this, and that would be to reclaim the digital environment in your home. And what this means is not just setting rules, but it's actually building a family digital contract, which there's an infographic that is attached in the description on this episode that you can download that will give you kind of the backbone of what a family digital contract looks like. So, and along those lines, if you watch Jonathan Haidt's video on the anxious generation together with your teen, and so instead of lecturing, watch the video and then ask, well, does it feel like these apps were designed to keep you stuck? And this shifts the enemy from you as the parent to simply the predatory design of the app. So get on Google, search that video, the Haidt entryway, watch it together with your teen. Next, the friction strategy. So this would be to use something like downtime on the iOS format or digital well-being on the Android format to hard cap short form video apps. And if they want more time, it has to be traded for active digital time. So in other words, if they're coding or they're doing digital graphic art or they're researching a hobby, something that is active on their part, then that's going to be okay as opposed to just the brain rot of the short form video. Next would be an 8 p.m. Wi-Fi cutoff. So when you kill the Wi-Fi, provide a dopamine bridge instead of just leaving them hanging. Have them transition into actually reading a physical book or completing a complex puzzle that requires some brain effort, or even cards, playing cards. Have a deck of card already on the table. The sudden lack of stimulation doesn't lead straight to what maybe would refer to as a withdrawal induced irritability. So, all right, so that's first step. Second, be this to rewire the urge response. So, as we know, porn and scrolling often happen in a trance, so to speak. Mindfulness helps to break that circuit. And this is where there's an old acronym that been teaching in therapy for years, the HALT, HALT. This is the HALT check-in. So teach them to ask if they are H is hungry, A is lonely, H is hungry, A is angry, L is lonely, T is tired. HALT is the acronym. Before they open a device. So managing those 4 variables can reduce their proclivity for falling into a pattern of addiction. Next, concept of urge surfing. Explain that an urge is like a wave. It peaks and then subsides. And if they can breathe through just 2 minutes of the itch to watch porn or to scroll, the intensity usually drops. So it's being able to just ride out that urge and then to have it start to dissipate. Next would be what I would refer to as dopamine fasting. So this would be maybe something like encouraging a tech-free Sunday, or even just 2 hours of no input time to let the brain's baseline dopamine levels to reset. So it's not, so it's, rather than every waking second of your day is a dopamine hunt, that we're creating these periods of time that would be a dopamine fast where we're not relying on those hits. A third thing, replace passive consumption with high dopamine alternatives. So in other words, the brain needs a win to replace the hit of porn or these short form video clips. So one alternative would just simply be long form video over short form video. So, and when I refer to long form, well, short form, we're talking like the 5 to 15 second clips. Long form would be something that is over the space of, maybe 30 minutes or 60 minutes or even 2 hours. And this would be deep dives. So if they like gaming, watch a 2-hour documentary on game design rather than a 60-second clip of gameplay. And this rebuilds the attention span. Interesting aside to that would be that over the years, it seems like even a lot of teens that I've talked to, even just the idea of sitting down to watch a movie, a traditional movie, a 2-hour movie has become dull and boring because their brain has become so adjusted to the short form video clips that sitting and watching one storyline for 2 hours is just too much. Next would be physical mastery. Engage in activities where progress is visible. Things like weightlifting can be great to track gains over time, to see your strength increasing and your muscle building where you're starting to gain muscle. Now, learning guitar riffs or carpentry, where it's kind of like the slow burn satisfaction of mastering a skill is the biological antidote to the instant gratification of porn. And Jonathan Haidt, he talks about like the slow dopamine versus the fast dopamine. And so really what we want to instill in our teens is the slow dopamine, the slow burn satisfaction of mastering a skill over time. And that is the antidote. All right, moving on to number 4, and that would be communication. And this would be where we want to shift from just the idea of it being an interrogation or an investigation into connection. And as we know, shame thrives in silence. So if a teen feels judged, if they feel interrogated, they may simply become better at hiding the behavior. We don't want to drive it underground. We want it to be out in the open. We want it to be an ongoing open communication, which can assist in developing the connection. And the connection is so vital because we know that addiction thrives in isolation. The opposite of isolation would be connection. So here's a few ideas on that. So one would be what would refer to as the drive time chat. And this would just simply be concept of heavy and difficult topics tend to be easier to discuss when you're not making direct eye contact. So this can happen while you're driving because there's not a lot of eye contact, or while you're walking side by side or hiking or biking. So this would be if you've got to have some heavy and hard dialogue, approach it through one of those methods. Another would be vulnerability modeling, which would be something to the effect of a parent saying, "Look, I have found myself scrolling for an hour today, and I felt gross afterwards. Do you ever feel that brain fog too?" Another would be externalizing the problem. So in other words, referring to the addiction or to the algorithm as something outside the teen, where it's not your problem. It's this challenge that we are tackling together. And then number 5 would be professional support and modeling. So, a few ideas under this would be you cannot ask your teen to do what you're not willing to do yourself. And so, this would be something like the phone basket. I see a lot of families doing pretty good with this, where there's an actual physical spot in the house, whether it be a charging station on the kitchen counter or in the hallway, a literal physical spot where everybody's phone goes at 9 p.m. or during meals. And this applies to you as a parent, not just to the teen. And we've talked about this a lot as far as professional help goes. If the habit is deeply ingrained, if it's addictive, then CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is going to be an important part of establishing a recovery. So a therapist, clinician specializing in adolescent and also digital and pornography addiction issues can help to identify the underlying triggers, social anxiety or academic pressures or boredom, family conflicts that can lead them to seek the escape. And as I talk about constantly, the recovery toolbox for teens, it's the curriculum we use at Therapy Associates and Star Guides for helping teens to establish a recovery from pornography addiction. And this includes the Breaking Free workbook, parent guide for you as parent, and the 101 tips for quitting porn. And this trio of workbooks, you can find it at the bookstore at therapyassociates.net. It's the blue version. The brown version is the adult version. So use that as a structure and a guide for establishing a recovery process. You can use it as a parent-led intervention. You can use it in conjunction with outpatient therapy. And we use it here at the clinic at Therapy Associates and in Star Guides. And then finally, number 6, the great rewiring education. Help them to see the big picture of their own development, particularly brain plasticity. So explain that their teen brain is like wet clay, and using porn now carves these deep grooves that make real-world relationships harder later on in life. So frame it as that we're working to protect your future joy. And then also, just as we hit on with the technology, phone-free zones. So particularly the bedroom. Designate bedrooms as a tech-free sanctuary. Provide old-school alarm clocks or watches so that the phone does not have to be the last thing they see at night and the first thing they see in the morning. There are great alarms that are not found on phones. So let's have phones out of the bedrooms. Parents, in closing, short-form videos are engineered for addiction. They're shrinking attention. They're weakening self-control. They're paving the way for bigger struggles like porn addiction. But with understanding, and particularly from this anxious generation, Jonathan Haidt's research, to some of the stories that we've shared today, and consistent, compassionate action on your part, you can guide your teen back to balance, help them to be more resilient and find real joy, set them up for real joy in the future. Parents, thanks for joining me today. I know your time is valuable. I hope you have found this to be helpful. Make sure download a copy of this infographic. It's in the description, the Digital Family Contract, to help reinforce these ideas in your home. And make sure to get the Recovery Toolbox for Teens in the bookstore at therapyassociates.net. And if this episode hit home, subscribe, leave a review, try to provide weekly strategies, tips, support for recovery. So tune in each week. Share your biggest screen time concern below. I love to read everything that comes in. For more resources, check out the resources link on the therapyassociates.net website, or any of our playlists on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matt. Keep showing up for your teen. They need you now more than ever. Take care, and I'll see you next time.